And I'm opening the waiting room. David, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is David Medina, and I am the COO and co-founder of Results for America. And we're proud to be hosting today's session with our partners, the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Today, we're excited to dive into two key components of a successful infrastructure strategy: community engagement and workforce development. This session will highlight how to gather and incorporate community input into your infrastructure projects, and how to develop and implement related workforce development initiatives that empower and strengthen communities through project labor agreements, apprenticeship programs, and more. As always, we want this to be an interactive session, so please post your questions as well as any comments you may have in the chat, and we will answer as many as possible during our Q&A session. We have an exciting session today. First, we're going to be hearing from two cities, Syracuse and Boise, that have put workforce and community engagement at the forefront of their infrastructure projects. And then we will be joined by the Domestic Policy Advisor to the President, Neera Tandon, who will share how the Biden-Harris administration is prioritizing these issues as cities across the nation, like all of yours, are investing in infrastructure and resilience. But before I introduce our first speaker, I want to highlight a toolkit our local infrastructure hub team recently released and put on our website, which is focused on how to leverage historic federal infrastructure funding to advance workforce opportunities in your communities. The toolkit highlights 5 primary strategies to drive workforce development: program design, policy, procurement, education and enforcement, monitoring, and evaluation. And here on our next slide, you see that our toolkit also provides more specific in-depth information, which can help you address specific gaps in your federal applications in the 9 areas featured on this slide here. And next, you will see that you'll also find in our toolkit leading examples of cities from all across the country that have successfully incorporated workforce initiatives into their bipartisan infrastructure law projects, including Syracuse and Boise, who are with us here today. And on the next slide here, you'll see, last but certainly not least, we also have resources in this toolkit of leading strategies for gathering and incorporating community input into your infrastructure projects. And so now I'm pleased to welcome Tracy Kalunga, the Civic Engagement Director at the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation, to moderate our policy panel. Tracy spent 16 years working in local government, including as the Chief Innovation Officer for Long Beach, California. So she understands firsthand very well the opportunities and challenges local leaders face in developing meaningful community engagement strategies. Tracy, over to you.
Thank you so much, David, and it's such a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. It is my honor to introduce our panelists. First, we have Greg Lowe, the Chief Policy Advisor for the City of Syracuse. He is responsible for leading a team to advance progress in Syracuse through communication, cooperation, and innovation, promoting Syracuse as the greatest city in America. You might have some competition there. Welcome, Greg.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here.
Wonderful. Our other panelist we have today is Steve Hubble. He's the Climate Action Manager for the Department of Public Works in Boise, Idaho. His responsibilities include leading climate action initiatives to improve sustainability and environmental health in Boise. Prior to that, though, he was the Stormwater Program Coordinator and Renewable Energy Project Manager for the City of Boise. Sounds like Boise is doing some great things and might be a competitor for the City of Syracuse.
Thanks, Tracy.
Happy to be in that company. That'd be good by me.
That's right, Greg. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be here today.
Wonderful. Well, we're so wonderful you're here hailing from your city halls to really share about the work that you've done, but also really around community engagement. So let's start with our first question. Community engagement has become a bit of a buzzword, and everyone says that they're doing it, and maybe they're even saying they're doing it right. What do you think good community engagement looks like? And whoever wants to go first.
I'll jump in first and just say, for us, community engagement in workforce matters means truly giving members of the community a decision-making place at the table regarding key workforce initiatives. So Syracuse, people may know, is home to one of the nation's largest highway infrastructure projects. We are currently underway after many years of controversy about just how we would replace the Interstate 81 viaduct through the center of the city with a community grid designed project to remove the viaduct. At this point, it's probably a $2.5 billion federally funded infrastructure project. And our team at City Hall have been working on this project with the New York State Department of Transportation for 6 years now, and there was years ahead of it. But a major part of our focus has been on maximizing the workforce opportunity that exists out of this project for people in our community, and not just creating jobs, but creating real careers for people. And so while there were still some years of work to be done to identify what specific approach would be used to replace the viaduct, Mayor Walsh charged our team with developing a program called Syracuse Build, modeled after San Francisco's City Build initiative, which was about bringing the major workforce, the major construction sponsors in our community, the city, the county, Syracuse University, our major upstate hospital group, together as the funders of major projects to develop a workforce preparation program ahead of the Interstate 81 project beginning. And Syracuse Build, a key part of the program was the creation of an initiative called Pathways to Apprenticeship. We've put more than 100 people into building and construction apprenticeships since over the past 3 years or so. 98% people of color from our city, 15% women. And Syracuse Build has been the center of our community's coordination around workforce development in the building and construction trades around infrastructure projects. Throughout that, so we used that to do the workforce development. We invited to the table and created a method called Interstate 81 Jobs Big Table, which is all about the key community stakeholders who care about workforce coming together repeatedly, first to develop the policy environment that enabled us to have local hiring on federally funded infrastructure projects, and then to develop community workforce agreements with the New York State Department of Transportation for the contracts for construction that set specific, aggressive goals for local hiring for people in Syracuse. The big table, which Mayor Walsh created, which was originally supposed to be really a table of people together, started in the heat of the pandemic. And so it became a virtual big table, which we thought would be an inhibition, but it hasn't been, because we've actually been able to, using virtual methods, bring more than 80 stakeholders together 10 times in the past 3.5 years to review the pipeline for providing workforce programs and the community workforce agreements. And the work is led by a community group called the Urban Jobs Task Force, a volunteer-based group that works with us to make sure that we have a culture that is ready to provide jobs. Last point is, the Urban Jobs Task Force assigned a core team of its top 3 leaders to work with the deputy mayor of Syracuse and other of our staff to plan each big table and to implement.
Greg, this is so impressive. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing. I love what you talked about, that 98% people of color, 15% women. And my guess is this urban jobs task force, maybe prior to the pandemic, could have been a advocacy group, right? But what the city, it sounds like, has done is built a bigger table where these groups can now sit with the city and start to negotiate opportunities and jobs for people.
You described
Phenomenal.
UJTF right. They are an advocacy group, and often they have been at odds with major employers, with local governments, with state governments. And we were able to sort of flip the table. So now UJTF and the New York State DOT literally work together to establish and report on the workforce progress.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. And it sounds like the local infrastructure was a great way for these groups to come together, where maybe previously they were adversaries. Now they're working in tandem. This is so exciting. Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, let's go over to Boise. Let's hear what they're working on.
Well, thanks, Tracy. Just focusing on community engagement specifically, I think it's one of those things that's sort of good community engagement, I think, is a lot like good leadership. It's hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. So there's a couple of themes for us that stand out. Inclusivity, transparency, and sustainability are the ones I wanted to touch on today. So for inclusivity, we're thinking about participation from a broad swath of community members and stakeholders. We're trying to do our best to remove obstacles to their participation, so to make sure that everybody has a voice and a seat, an appropriate seat and representation. And then thinking about transparency, we've been diligent in trying to make sure that our intentions and our objectives that we're seeking from our community engagement activities are clear, so that the folks that are participating trust the process and understand what the potential outcomes are going to be, what their roles will be, how they can contribute, and what that success will look like going forward. And then for sustainability, and I think this is particularly important with groups that perhaps haven't engaged as much with government historically, is just trying to establish long-term relationships, because this isn't a one-time endeavor, and it really has a spectrum across numerous activities.
Steve, that is just, again, you made some really great points there around process, long-term relationships. Let's hang out in Boise a little bit longer. Tell us about some specific practices your government uses to ensure community engagement. I think, like many cities across the US, there's a distrust in government. There's this national conversation happening. I believe cities have this unique opportunity to really broker between city government and our local community residents. So what are some specific examples you can give us?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. Let me start with a little bit of setup about our community engagement team. So technical practitioners like myself are supported by an in-house community engagement team with significant staff working in outreach, graphic design, all those sort of traditional skills that you would think of from those groups. But we've tried to really differentiate ourselves in that team by identifying some new areas of focus that are perhaps a little different. And a couple that I want to point out are language access. So we have a staff person specializing in that. We have a staff person specializing in accessibility, and then also a focused staff person for neighborhood outreach, and also traditionally underrepresented groups. So in addition to normal responsibilities, having folks that are targeting each of those areas within their work. And then, obviously there's a whole litany of different practices that are going to vary based on the approach or type of feedback that we want to achieve. But we have really frequent engagement with neighborhood associations. That's been a really successful avenue when we're thinking about land development and construction and things like that are of interest to those groups. On some of our special initiatives, we'll take the time to do detailed community surveys, host focus groups, which are particularly relevant for long-term planning activities, where we can get initial input and then come back and test some ideas. over time. And then all that in addition to sort of the standard outreach activities that many of our communities undertake with social media, traditional media, and the like.
Oh, this is wonderful, Steve. I hope that you're giving some great ideas to our fellow City Hall staffers on the call today. And we have some mayors here as well. Welcome, mayors. We're so happy you're here. Steve, I just want to highlight a few things that you said. Language accessibility continues to become a need in city halls. So that is a best practice that we here at the Bloomberg Center for Public Innovation attest to. Accessibility, really ensuring that there's accessibility for all types of humans living in our city, that neighborhood outreach, and then also the surveys and the focus groups. It's important to do co-creation and ideation sessions with our community residents. And it sounds like there's this circular approach where you're getting back to the community saying, we heard you in the focus group. Now we're going to do this project together. So these are great examples. I'd love to go back and hear more about this workforce development strategy. You know, when I was working for the city of Long Beach, we'd oftentimes would go to the community and say, there's rising violence. How can we co-create solutions? There's illegal dumping. Let's work together, right? And over the community would say, we know that's your issue, City Hall, but our issue is jobs. We want jobs for our young people. We need jobs for our families. We want to keep these young kids out of gangs and out of crime. And the way to do that is jobs. So, Greg, I heard you go off mute and you're laughing. Tell us about your workforce development strategy and how you've connected that with your local infrastructure work.
I think Syracuse Build is really our great initiative on that front. And I think the important reason Syracuse Build works is because of the stakeholders and community partners that are at the table. So I touched on Syracuse Build a little while ago before I talked more about Big Table. The premise of Syracuse Build from the beginning, based on how successful they were in San Francisco, was first to make sure we had at the table those who are sponsors of major construction projects. Why? Because they have checks to be written and ideally could convene at the table with us a next key component of workforce success, organized labor. And so Syracuse Build has had strong participation from its inception with all of the members of our building and construction trades organizations who have become active partners in the Syracuse Build program. And as we started to construct Syracuse Build, the other component was community organizations. In this case, I mentioned earlier, like Urban Jobs Task Force, who held us to account throughout that we were actually building a structure that would lead to local job creation. And we're seeing that through the data that I referenced to you earlier about the number of people landing, not just in short-term construction jobs, but in quality career apprenticeships in the city. And so that's been the way we've used Syracuse Build to say to our community, there are opportunities for you to experience prosperity as we bring in these major infrastructure projects to Syracuse. One benefit I'd note for communities, and one of the things we think has helped Syracuse, is because we had the structure in place for Syracuse Build, going back to 2020, when we really first succeeded in getting the first classes going. When Invest in America brought to Syracuse opportunities in chips and semiconducting, as Boise has experienced, we had a ready-made, provable workforce program with community partners at the table to demonstrate to Micron in particular that Syracuse was a city that could meet challenging workforce demands. Having that structure in place was critical for us to be able to be a strong partner with our county and with the state in achieving the Biden-Harris administration's goals of semiconducting manufacturing at large scales here in the US. And that's happening just north of our city in Clay, and construction on that project is underway. We don't think without a Syracuse Build structure in place, which we had started back in 2018, actually had in the field in 2020 that in 2022 and 2023, when semiconducting opportunities were emerging, that Syracuse would have been as attractive a candidate.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So 2018, you started some of the pre-planning,
Yeah.
putting that structure together, those relationships, those partnerships. 2020 was the catapult, and now here we are in 2024 seeing the outcomes of that investment. I think that's important for cities to also see that when you start planning these initiatives, you have to have the 5-year, 7-year, and 10-year strategy in place. Tell us, Greg. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir.
No, I think you're so right, because I mean, the reality is community engagement is hard. And you know, the reason people often bypass it is because we feel like we can get there faster if we just implement ourselves. But along the way, so when you bring this, that range of community partners around the table, that's why it took us 2.5 years just to get Syracuse Build up and running and operating, create a job. And I can tell you, many on the call may experience this. Mayor Walsh would stop in my office and the deputy mayor's office many times in 2019, in 2020, asking, how many jobs have we delivered yet on Syracuse Build? What do I need to do to help you get there faster? And our job was to try to make sure we had a really durable, long-term structure in place. And he always gave us the room to do that, but he was pushing really hard for us to get people in place, because the community engagement process was hard work.
Thank you for your honesty. And we need mayors to push us, right? Yes, things take time, but if we didn't have the mayor walking in our office every day or every other day, right, it helps kind of build that momentum and that community trust over time. So, I want to hear about equity and economic mobility. This is a changer for many families, maybe who haven't had access to good paying blue collar jobs or white collar jobs. How is this changing the ecosystem in your city, having these workforce development strategies connected to local infrastructure? And again, whoever wants to go first, I'd love to open the floor.
Well, it's honestly challenging to follow Greg's last response, given the robustness of their work on this topic. And so I think it's a good opportunity though to acknowledge in some ways that, and I'll get to the equity part, Tracy, but I think it's a good opportunity to acknowledge that all local governments aren't at the same timeline as workforce development as others. And particularly me, I'm coming from this as a perspective of a climate and sustainability manager, and it's that's not an enviable task in and of itself. And all of a sudden, you've got this additional bolt-on of your programs that tie to workforce development, which is tricky. And I think it's also too important to acknowledge those differences in city landscape on this topic, but also the regional and state landscape on this topic as well. Those are going to vary greatly depending on where you are. But having said that, we understand that the federal government's placed a priority on this, particularly in their funding programs. So it's something that's been important to us as we work through our competitive grant applications, and we have had success, at least with charging and fueling infrastructure, which appreciate the highlight there in the case study that was introduced by David at the beginning of the presentation. I think the focus on equity again goes back to maybe some of my earlier comments on community engagement, but really just trying to engage, whether it's in community engagement, workforce development, or the intersection of both of them, is those members of our community who've been historically underserved, so we can center their needs in our work and opportunities where possible. The workforce development program that I'm involved with, specifically on that CFI grant, will focus on electricians and electrical infrastructure. And Greg mentioned our similarities in terms of the microprocessor manufacturing. And so we are experiencing extraordinary constraints in that labor market here that are causing huge economic ripples on our projects because we're trying to electrify at the same time as we're doing all of this other work. So these initiatives are going to be really important.
Thank you for sharing. What a great opportunity. I'd also love to hear, it sounds like you're doing some work with your local workforce innovation and opportunity centers. So every jurisdiction around the country has a center that manages their Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act funding, and that's essentially workforce development, if you will. And also our city colleges and trade schools. Those oftentimes are places where it sounds like there could be some partnership. So how have either of your cities partnered with those groups in furthering the work of jobs?
So in Syracuse, our Workforce Innovation Board is known as CNY Works. And CNY Works is the home to our staff for Syracuse Build. So they've been our home base for the team that has built out Syracuse Build. We financed Syracuse's creation originally through a partnership with our local economic development organization, Center State CEO, which brought the expertise to the table to help us build the program. They also found private philanthropic dollars from a number of national foundations that gave us the initial funds that bridged us to significant scale state and federal funding flowing through our WIB, Syracuse CNY Works. That's been an essential partner. And then we also work very closely with both our community college. Here it's Onondaga Community College, which is one of our providers, particularly as we move into careers in semiconducting. And then the State University of New York Educational Opportunities Center. So our state-funded careers and workforce training program is a critical partner to both Syracuse Build and the career development that's happening in the technology and semiconducting categories.
Okay, Greg, I don't know. We said that your city's working to become one of the best cities in America. I mean, really, this picture you're painting, right? You've connected all these dots. You've brought these players together who maybe before 2018 didn't work together, and now they are. So be a little honest with us.
Mm-hmm.
What challenges have you encountered in implementing a community-driven workforce development strategy? We got to hear all the highs. Can you share with us maybe what cities can learn from some of the challenges you all have faced?
Yeah. One big challenge, I'll mention two challenges. Challenge one is scale. 106 apprenticeships is good, but we need 20 times that. And that's a really difficult challenge for us to get up to the scale that we need to build a truly local workforce to undertake first the Big 81 Viaduct project, but also, starting at the same time and continuing after it, the development of 4 chip fabs in the same county, and so we don't yet have the pipeline ready to fill the opportunities that are coming. That's a significant challenge. We're working really hard to build the capacity of our programs. And then the second category the second category of where the challenges are is we still aren't effectively reaching all of those who need us to come to them to engage people who have been left behind in the programs that we're offering. So for example, we've been working and Senator Schumer's team has helped us attract congressionally directed spending to build a Syracuse Build training program for people who have not been in the traditional economy in Syracuse, people who are currently struggling in gang workforce, gang opportunities, where their jobs are coming through other means. And we need to find ways to offer these high potential individuals the ability to participate in Syracuse Build. So we're actually building that program now in coordination with our mayor's office to reduce gun violence. But we haven't solved it yet.
But you're working on, Father Greg Boyle out of LA says nothing
Yeah.
stops a bullet like a job.
Yeah,
So
right.
the fact you're putting these pieces together, local infrastructure hub, workforce development, individuals who have historically been disenfranchised from workforce for different reasons, but you're pulling those pieces together. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in your city. Steve, if you'll round us out, again, what are some of the challenges in Boise as they give us some closing thoughts? If you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat, and we're going to start answering some of the city questions. So Steve, over to you.
Well, just briefly, Tracy, I touched on some of the resource challenges and the capacity challenges for cities where this might be a new or less active area of work. And then I think one other challenge we've seen interestingly in our organization is the prioritization of our efforts for workforce development within our own organization versus workforce development needs in the community. I think ultimately, selfishly, we're having staffing challenges within our own organization. So we think about those and how we can support those because they're they're closest to home for us. But obviously, the workforce development on the community scale has a much broader and significant impact and something that we can't ignore. So we're hopeful to find ways to align those efforts in mutually beneficial ways.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Steve. Over there in Boise, Idaho, we have some questions for both of you. Let's see. Richard Diaz from Milwaukee commented, I love that Greg mentioned the highway project. Can we share more about other jobs, apprentices that have been placed? So what are some other areas where apprentices have been placed? Also, which building trade apprenticeships? I imagine the laborers were one, but were there others?
Yes. First, building trade apprenticeships, major opportunities and strong participation from carpenters, from the steam fitters and plumbers unions, painters unions, and yes, laborers, of course, which have a critical role in these kinds of transportation-related infrastructure projects, are also active participants in creating job opportunities for people in these projects. We know that there are other jobs occurring, but I don't have data yet, and we're still the Syracuse build, or the Interstate 81 viaduct project itself, is in the early stages of its construction, but we know it will create significant spin-off jobs in our economy from the massive influx of people who will be working on the projects. And we expect that to be continuing for the next 5 to 7 years. That'll be in service industries. Obviously, we anticipate and many industries that support all of the construction trades.
Wonderful. And just adding on to that piece, Greg, do you have a partner, whether it be the university or economic development, that's going to help you track these outcomes and outputs from this long-term investment?
New York State DOT is currently working with us as our big lead on the data management and tracking, and we feel really good about the way New York State Transportation Commissioner Marie-Therese Dominguez has structured her team to provide a public-facing regular reporting on jobs progress in Syracuse, particularly, I will say, as it relates to those on the specific contracts that DOT is letting. And then our partner, Center State CEO, which I referenced earlier, which is our local economic development organization, effectively our Chamber of Commerce and workforce development partner, does does additional jobs tracking information.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Steve, if I don't know if you wanted to add there, we also have some questions coming in.
No, nothing to add, Tracy. I did see, if it's helpful, I did see Katie's question about grants that help local governments establish workforce development programs. So I can just mention the one that I'm most familiar with is the EPA has some workforce development grant opportunities that were of interest to us. So the big portion of our operation is focused on water renewal, or what's historically referred to as wastewater treatment. So, and we're doing some really advanced work in that space here. And so that funding source has been of specific interest to us. And then it looked like there was a quick follow-up on that about the receipt of competitive funds. And so I guess if it didn't come through in my earlier response, but the city did receive funding for EV charging through the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program, which is a federal highway administration competitive grant. And so workforce development was a required program element to achieve funding. And so we do have a portion of that funding source that will support workforce development. We're still in the application, or excuse me, the agreement phase with FHWA. So haven't started yet, but hopefully some accomplishments to report as we get moving forward.
Wonderful. We appreciate that. I feel like you read my mind. I literally was going to ask you those questions. Katie from Rapid City and Liz from Louisville, they were tag teaming over there in the chat. Also, could you share with us, Steve, where could we learn about this work? Are you partnering again with a university or a entity that's going to help you capture the data as you report back out to your community?
Well, some of that to be determined, Tracy, but some of the partners that we've identified for that specific work are the local community college, College of Western Idaho, and then a regional community college, College of Southern Idaho. They've been particularly active in the renewable energy industry here, which aligns with a lot of our climate work. We've connected with the Brotherhood of Electrical Workers here, the Idaho Department of Labor, our Workforce Development Council, and then some specific associations in the region for electrical training. So those are some of the stakeholders that will be that were really interested in this funding opportunity, and we're hoping to ink some details on working with as we move forward.
Wonderful. This is great. I think, every city around the country could think about how do they partner with their local community colleges, university, public and private. As you said, a lot of universities are interested in this. Again, when I worked for the city of Long Beach, we partnered with California State University Long Beach to do a lot of research, evaluation, climate action, climathons. Young people and professors want to get involved and be a part of the solution. So I really want to thank you and Greg for mentioning, how you partner with your local colleges and universities. And along those lines of education, Isabella from Boston is asking us, how do you build trust with your communities, especially around high schoolers? How do you help them engage and access career paths that you're looking to build?
So our school district it's the Syracuse City School District. And so it is an independent city school district with its own board, own elected board. Budget flows through the city, but it's fully funded through its own, through city taxes and state government funding. It operates a very successful career and technical education program with more than 60 different fields of career training, including a number of careers now in new technology careers and semiconducting, which is a market like Boise. We're trying to learn how to make sure we meet the workflow demand that is being created by the federal government's investment in semiconducting in the United States. The school district's team in career and technical education is one of our critical partners in the Interstate 81 Jobs Big Table Initiative. They are always there at the table learning how they can get more people started in building and construction careers beginning in high school. and help us create a seamless pathway for them to jobs into some of our other training programs. So school districts are, not surprisingly, an essential part of that ecosystem.
This is great. Music to my ears, and tying it
Yeah.
back to that 10-year plan. If you're investing in your high schoolers today, let's say your 18-year-olds, by the time they're 28, they have established careers, great jobs with benefits. Maybe they're ready to buy a house in your city, right? So that's the dream that many young people are looking for, and you're establishing that in high school. So that's wonderful. Steve, we'd love to hear, what's happening in Boise, Idaho. How are you engaging your high schoolers, or how do you dream of engaging your high schoolers?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. I think for us, we try to have alignment on STEM education. So in the city's outreach activities, we really try to drive home the need for STEM learning that translate to STEM careers, obviously matching Greg's comments about some of our underlying industries here. And then something I'm particularly proud of that I hope will resonate with the audience today is a little off the workforce topic, but we have a Youth Climate Action Council that we host every year that I get to work with. So that's really inspiring and helps keep the big picture in mind. But just one of my personal goals with that group is to really drive home the importance of public service. This is my 23rd year in local government, which it doesn't feel like it's been that many, but I just try to drive home to them how important public services at all levels of government. We really, really, really need good public servants and good, smart young people coming into these careers.
Just phenomenal. I mean, this is music to my ears. You're thinking about today, you're thinking about tomorrow, you're thinking about the future of your city. It's such a great investment. Wonderful. We have, let's see, Hawaii has some cross-sector workforce development partnerships. Good Jobs Hawaii, they're giving that as a resource. If there's other cities that want to share in the chat, resources or the work that you're doing that you want to help elevate here. But what else is on your mind as, we think about some closing thoughts, Greg and Steve, what is some other wisdom you want to impart upon these cities as they connect their green jobs with their workforce development? I'm calling, we want green and green. So when I talk to young people, as I travel around the country for the grant programs we manage, they're interested in making money. Okay, we care about climate and they care about money. So how do we connect the green with the green? And let's have Greg go first. You're on mute, my friend.
I just saw that. Another of our key initiatives, which Steve made a reference to what's happening in Boise, is STEM education. For us, STEAM education, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And our STEAM initiative is anchored by New York State's first regional STEAM high school to be built in downtown Syracuse at a formerly vacant high school building that was out of use in the center of our downtown for nearly 30 years, which we earlier this year began construction on a state-of-the-art. And it's the regional part I want to emphasize that we think is important to preparing even more young people for careers in technology and green economy, because while 60% of the students will come from our city school district, 40% of the seats in this high school, which will begin filling in September of 2025, will come from suburban school districts. And our key goal is to seize on the strength of our city's career and technical education programs, which offer far more opportunities than most of our suburban school districts can offer, not surprisingly. We just have the greater wealth of capacity in career and technical education. So we're going to put city school kids together with suburban school kids, which we think is really going to build a stronger community and a stronger workforce. It's a major push for us, and I'm really excited to say we're on track to open that school, new STEAM high school in the center of our city in September of 25.
Okay, Greg, all eyes on Syracuse. We look forward to seeing the outcome of that project. Tell us, what about Boise? What's going on over there? What closing thoughts and wisdom do you have for us?
Well, Tracy, when I think about that question from my seat, I think about the work that our city and many cities do to plan what's ahead in our climate future. And I think historically we've thought a lot about the what and the when that we need to do for climate, but we haven't always thought as much about the how. So one initiative we're thinking about here is how we tie that how specifically around workforce development to all the significant amounts of work that we need to do to achieve our clean energy and climate action initiatives. And obviously, then that's going to help us on the back end to meet our overarching goals and themes that we've talked about with equity, with the economic benefits that climate solutions are going to bring to our communities. And so I'd suggest I'll close there.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Well, this has been very inspirational. I am, over the moon to hear what's happening in Syracuse and Boise, two different sides of our country, but really leading the way in our work. We look forward to following your work on LinkedIn and all the different websites you posted for us. So we look forward, and congratulations to both of you. You're public servants. You've committed your life to your cities and to your communities. I just want to commend you both and thank you for your time this afternoon. Wonderful. Well, without further ado, we have a guest with us from the Director of Domestic Policy Council from the White House. We're so honored she's joined us, Neera Tandon. She's going to be sharing a little more about the federal work together and answer some of your questions. So get your questions ready. And Neera, we're so welcome to have you. Over to you, my dear.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Bloomberg and its partners. And I have known its phenomenal work with cities over many, many years. I know our cities are better places to work and live and better contributors to economic growth because of the phenomenal work Bloomberg has done. And so I just really happy to be here to answer questions and to just say thank you. I'll just say a few words about our overall strategy on ensuring that we're doing everything we can to create the vibrant local infrastructure hubs that are so crucial. Efforts like these are critical to ensure that communities across the country maximize the benefits of the investments we're making. Essentially, we have put a lot of resources on the table, but we know to fully reach the potential of those investments, it takes an incredible ecosystem. While we're incredibly proud of the investments we've made from CHIP to Bill to IRA, we know that it takes a lot of various partners on the ground to make change. And I guess our focus is fundamentally on ensuring that we have the workforce to truly take advantage of this moment. And what I mean by that is, as I've said, we don't have a workforce for these investments. We're not going to meet those goals. And so that's why for us, we have had a strategic approach to ensure that there are various pathways to success here. Special to all of this is the president's belief that you should not have to go to college to have a middle-class life, to have true opportunity, to have real growth. And so that is why we are proud of the various efforts we've made. Sector strategies, registered apprenticeships. We're going to have more registered. We have ensured that we have significant new investments in the budget on career technical education. I know Bloomberg has been really innovating in that space. And then, of course, supportive services like childcare and other ways that we make it easier for people to be good workers. So while we haven't received the workforce dollars we wanted from Build Back Better, other initiatives, we have truly focused on registered apprenticeships regardless. Paying, we're proud of the wages that they're paying. We're really proud of the work we've done on care. Our care executive order, which is really also focused on fundamentally supporting care work and allowing workers to be to have the support they need. And then a whole range of other investments. But we also know local leaders are vital to maximize the investments we've made. We want to be good partners with you, and we want to make sure that that we use this moment in time where we're putting federal resources on the table with smart strategies around workforce so that we could actually ensure that every community can take part in these jobs. Every community has access to these high paying jobs, high wage jobs, that people these jobs have not been traditional for them are still have access. I mean, this is a moment where we can leverage these investments to provide opportunity for communities that have sometimes been left behind in the investments we make. So with that, I will turn it back to you, and happy to answer any questions.
That's great, Neera. David Medina from Results for America. Great to see you, Neera.
Great to see you again.
Yeah, you too. One quick question. The Biden-Harris administration pushed really hard for strong recommendations and requirements on workforce development and on community engagement being included in central in the bill in CHIPS and IRA. Can you just say a little more about why workforce development and why community engagement were so important in those historic federal pieces of legislation?
Thank you so much for that question. So I think, what we're trying to do is take the resources we're putting down on the table and address as many issues as we can with it. Of course, first and foremost, we have our climate goals, and we have our infrastructure and competitiveness goals, and our research goals from our competitive. We wanted to make sure that ensuring that we have the workforce that we need, and bringing, as I said, people who haven't come to the table, who haven't been in jobs, really making sure people who are receiving these dollars are thinking strategically about investments. And so when a bill in upstate New York and thinks through its partnerships with unions, but also thinks through its investments in childcare to make sure it has the workforce.
Oh, I think we might have lost Neera. She's one of the busiest people in Washington, D.C. Maybe we'll give it a minute to see if she joins us again. Thanks to all of you for being a part of this important discussion today. I think we wanted to invite Neera. She and the administration are such big proponents, advocates for embedding workforce development and community engagement in all of these big historic once-in-a-generation laws. So we thank you all for being with us today, and we'll just give her another minute to see if she joins.
In the meantime, maybe we'll run our poll to start getting some of your sentiments. We'd love to hear what kind of support you all need for community engagement. So we'll run our poll while we're getting Director Tan back.
Yep, and there's Neera. Neera, you're back with us. Can you hear us, Neera? Okay, please fill out your poll, everyone. Neera, I don't know if you can hear us. We can't hear you. And, maybe while we're waiting for her, maybe I'll also just share some information about our 3 upcoming sessions, which we hope you all will join us for. On July 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern, we will be joined by U.S. Treasury Department leaders for a discussion about the upcoming obligation deadline for state and local fiscal recovery funds. as well as the Treasury Department's new Affordable Housing How-To Guide. And looks like we have Neera. Neera, we can see you, and hopefully we can hear you.
I'm so sorry. Can you hear me? I'm so
Yes,
sorry.
we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Near Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I apologize, but it was so important for me to talk to you guys. I wanted to try to make this call.
Yeah, we were all just saying that you are one of the busiest people in Washington, D.C., and so we knew you were somewhere out there doing great work. So any final thoughts, Neera, for this group of mayors and other local government officials from across the country?
Yeah, I just really want to be good partners with you. We've been we have various models, apprenticeships, career technical education, hubs, workforce hubs. And I think what we know is that the most effective programs bring everyone to the table. That takes local leadership. So we're grateful for the local leaders here. It is challenging. Workforce dollars are a little challenging because they're dollars across agencies. We appreciate that. They're dollars of commerce, or dollars of labor, education. So that puts more onus on us to be thoughtful partners with you. And we want to maximize the potential of these investments. And we know we have to do that with all of you. So just really grateful for your leadership and partnership.
No, that's great. And one final question, if it's okay.
Yeah, please.
Any specific examples of sort of leading local and state efforts to braid different federal investments to optimize recruitment, placement, retention of new workers? Any leading workforce efforts out there you've heard of?
Yeah, I think that the beauty of hubs, in a sense, is it is a locus by which you can use the workforce boards, which candidly can be helpful. And it's like, there's some variance there. Workforce hubs, they pull down the apprenticeships, figure out with the governor, the state dollars. I mean, there are various efforts that seem to be particularly impactful. We've heard a lot about what's going on in upstate New York. But I think that the model that really works is bringing the relevant players to the table, as I know so many mayors are so used to doing. But the challenge is we have federal, state, and of course, local dollars, and then multiple agencies, which is always a challenge. So trying to bring all those people together, the local, the regional commerce person, the regional labor person, so that you are getting the full panoply of resources around one table. Has been the most successful model in my mind.
That's great. Well, Neera, on behalf of everyone on today's call, I want to thank you for everything you do every day across issue areas on behalf of all of us, and for being such a strong advocate for cities and towns across the country. So thank you, and keep up the great work.
Right back at you. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing like live TV, everybody, huh? So go back to just sharing what our 3 upcoming sessions are with everyone. So we hope you will join us for these 3. So again, on July 16th at 2 p.m., we're going to be joined by the Treasury Department, and they'll be talking about the upcoming obligation deadline for state and local fiscal recovery funds and their new Affordable Housing How-To Guide. And then on July 23rd at 2 p.m., we'll be hosting a session on how municipalities can access digital equity funds, since we expect the Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program, NOFO, to be released in the next couple of weeks, so don't miss out on that one. And then the next day, on July 24th, we'll continue our conversation about how to close the broadband gap. So we are picking our topics and picking the dates for them based on feedback from all of you and based on the deadlines coming out of Washington, D.C. And we hope you find them all helpful. So thank you for being with us today, and hope to see you next time. Thanks all.